Ah, shit, we failed. Together we're going to defend our freedoms. The cancel culture, the defunding culture, the defending culture, and they defend the wrong things. Nobody ever thought what is happening would happen. We're going to take back our country, and we're going to take it back at a level that is very, very good. You would have had a 1917 Spanish flu number. Shots or jabs, as they like to call it. I actually like the other word better. Somebody sits down in a chair. If you don't sit down lightly, the damn thing would collapse. I never went on my ass. Biden has halted wall construction, suspended removals and even removables, shredded our groundbreaking. I said, General, I might have to grab you, but I'm not going down under. I think that was a booby trap. Well, when did he do a deal? Oh, did he do another deal? They're going through every deal I've ever done. I am not the one trying to undermine American democracy. I'm the one that's trying to save it.
Coming up on We're Speaking Tonight, a special governor's edition of the O for Fuck's Sake Awards.
This is part of the radical left's agenda. They don't want to celebrate America or our freedoms. They're pushing critical race theory. They're pushing the 1619 Project, and this is just another one of those battles to erase our true, honest, and patriotic history in this country.
The battle for truth continues.
Hoax after hoax, lie after lie, corrupt investigation after corrupt investigation.
And Professor Melissa Harris Perry joins us for a wide-ranging conversation. We're Speaking starts right now.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Lincoln Project's We're Speaking. I'm Lisa Senecal, and I am here with my brilliant and funny, incredibly talented friend, Maya May.
Oh, hello everyone. And Lisa, you are one of the most fabulously funny and informed friends that I have. And so I'm going to make you an honorary comic. I've decided that's you're funny enough to be a comic. So, But today, I guess we're not talking about funny stuff.
Yeah, not entirely. We'll fit funny in for sure, but we're going to be talking today about the importance of history and memory in being able to maintain a democracy. You know, Steve Schmidt asked the question, can a society survive without memory? And we're really talking about, can a democracy survive without memory? And one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that Germany is able to teach its children accurate history of Germany, which obviously includes the Holocaust. And they're not fearful that learning that is going to make their children unpatriotic. In fact, they think it's a really important part of being a responsible German citizen that they know the harm that their country caused. But for some reason, the Republicans don't have that same faith in the children of the United States, that they want to be able to pass laws to dictate what history can and can't be taught in our public schools. And so I really have to question, like, what do Republicans think is wrong with, in particular, the white children of America, that if they learn accurate U.S. history, they are no longer going to be able to love this country? I've got a lot more faith in our kids.
Yeah, you know, calling everybody else a snowflake, but then they're trying to protect their children from what Black kids, people of color, marginalized people have to experience day in and day out, and still stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. So I think it's super important for us to recognize the experience of Black Americans and our ability to still love this country and fight for this country, and acknowledging our past. And, you know, I liken it to Chris Rock. He had a bit about talking about how Black Americans, we have a complicated relationship with America, which, you know, we truly do. And to me, trying to erase history, trying to pretend like slavery didn't happen, or that we're not going to talk about it accurately, or the Tulsa massacre, is basically like just trying to brush all this under the rug and say, hey, we're just going to move forward. And I'm like, I feel like Black America, we're like that like angry ex-girlfriend right now. Like, no, absolutely not. It's like, you will not brush this under the rug. And as a matter of fact, where are my flowers? Reparations are flowers. Yes. In this analogy.
Yeah, and it's not just like distant U.S. history or even as recently as the civil rights movement that they don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about January. They don't want to accurately discuss what it is that happened on January 6th when they incited an insurrection. And hell, they don't even want, like Marjorie Taylor Greene last week was comparing the Holocaust to vaccines. And then 2 days later, she was saying, I never, ever said anything that compared the Holocaust to vaccines. So, they want us to immediately forget every offensive, dangerous, anti-democratic, authoritarian thing that they do as soon as they do it. We're all supposed to be okay with that and just move on and pretend we don't know what's happening.
Yeah, it's like trying to rewrite history in real time. It's enough to make your head spin. It's like, yeah. And it's pretty clear that Republicans, they're hell-bent on destroying their own legitimacy. And we actually asked you specifically about it. We said, do you think the GOP has any credibility left? How would they restore it? We asked you to tweet at us or leave us a voicemail.
And boy, did you. You folks had some things to say. Plain Beauty reached out to us via Twitter and said, credibility, not at all. We are in the next era of the Republican Party. This is the fourth era of the GOP, and it will be several decades before it morphs into something new. GOP is not what it once was and never will be. It is the furthest away from the party of Lincoln that it's ever been. True.
Yeah, accurate. We also heard from B. Frisand, who wrote, no. It's such that any who may retain some mute it to avoid being Cheneyed, excellent use of a verb there, or ostracized by the bully GOP. They're desperate and will do anything to gain power except be honest. Remember the term going postal? Now we can say going GOP and imply the same psychopathy. Yes.
Yeah, it's true. And I'm generally opposed to verbing nouns, but in this case, verbing Cheney is a good one, and I'm definitely going to steal it. We have another tweet from Barb Lindsay, who said, until the GQP denounces Trump and his cultists, there is zero credibility. If they told their voters the truth, put the nation before party and themselves, maybe they could redeem themselves. Maybe. Yeah, I don't see that.
I don't really see that happening at all. I was like, that is wishful thinking. Yeah. And speaking of, we have our first nominee for our governor's edition of the Offs Awards, somebody who's definitely not going to change. There are so many Republican governors across the country doing jacked up anti-democratic shit. And that's why we're doing this. Our first nominee this week is Florida's own Ron DeSantis. Oh, coming off Take Your Daughter to Discriminate Day, where Ron DeSantis has his young daughter hand him a pen so he could sign a cool anti-trans youth bill. DeSantis is celebrating Florida's lousy 40% COVID vaccination rate with a Freedom Over Fauci concert where Floridians packed in shoulder to unvaccinated shoulder. Like, it's insane. And if you weren't able to contract COVID there, Ron wants to give you another chance. So he's made it illegal and punishable with huge fines for cruise lines in Florida to inquire about the vaccination status of the cruises. Like, yeah. Freedom over Fauci sounds about right.
It's bananas. Florida, you just keep it coming, Florida. It's kind of remarkable. Our next nominee tonight is Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota. The intensity with which Kristi Noem is kissing Trump's ring, it's clear she has aspirations of higher office, and she's apparently planning on using her leadership during COVID as a selling point, which is kind of amazing. That's like next level spin. Her terrible COVID handling. I don't even know how she can do that, but you know what they say, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And Christy just wants to use like number to number comparison, no matter how many people live in different states. So here's the bottom line. South Dakota, number 2 in the nation for COVID infections per capita. North Dakota's number 1. South Dakota, every 1 in 8 South Dakotans have gotten the virus, and every 1 in 500 have died. Noam says South Dakota is the model for the nation, and I gotta agree with her. It's the model of what not to do, and she's the model of who not to vote for, except if you're voting for the Oh for Fuck's Sake award, and then absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. But there's so many other good nominees. That's the thing. Our next and final offs nominee is Greg Abbott of Texas. He's not happy that Democrats staged a walkout, preventing him from getting his voter suppression law for now. But he's downright gleeful about signing a patriotic education bill not supported by a single Democrat in the Texas legislature. And what's not to be happy about? Look how happy the same type of laws have made the leaders of China and North Korea. And who doesn't want to be linked to China and North Korea? Apparently not Greg Abbott.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Even using the language, a patriotic education, like, oh my God.
It's creepy. It's absolutely.
Yes, yeah, like you couldn't possibly be more obvious what it is, the goal is. Like, okay, you want to be an authoritarian nation and you want to brainwash the children. So, okay, got that.
Yeah.
All right, coming up, she's a writer, a professor, a TV and now radio host, and so much more. Melissa Harris Perry joins us to talk politics, institutional memory, and chickens. We will be right back after a few special messages.
Yeah, guys, answering a question about GOP having any credibility left, absolutely not. Zero. I kind of wish they did. I wish there was a credible Republican Party, but there's not. And the guy that was President Trump, that man needs to be he needs to be arrested. I'm tired of hearing about investigations. I don't even read about that crap anymore. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of hearing it. He's got to be arrested. He's got to be stopped. Our democracy's at risk. You know it. I know it. A whole bunch of us know it. Why? I keep waiting. We're all waiting. Something's got to be done. No, none of this is normal. None of this is normal. Oh, please help us.
Are you overwhelmed by having a conscience? Is the price of integrity more than you're willing to pay? If so, you likely qualify for moral bankruptcy. Unfortunately, you're not alone. Moral bankruptcy can feel confusing. You might ask yourself, when did I sell my soul? Am I as loathsome as Ted Cruz? In most cases, the answer is yes. Yes, you are. So whether you've embraced white supremacy, misogyny, sedition, or just decided you don't give fuck all unless there's something in it for you, it's time you declare moral bankruptcy. Call today. The RNC's Morally Bankrupt team is standing by. You might be devoid of decency, but you're not alone.
I just want to thank you for everything you're doing to get our country back on the right track. The Republicans have gone totally off the rails, and it's really scary for us and for our children, the next generation of children. You all are a lot smarter than I am. All I can do is vote and try to talk some sense into people, but I don't have a platform like you do, so I appreciate you doing what you're doing and figure out a way to turn this thing around. Thank you.
Welcome back. Tonight we're speaking about the vital connections between memory, history, truth, and our democracy, and why the GOP is apparently on a mission to destroy all three.
Yeah, if we cannot face our past, reconcile those truths, and remember our mistakes, we're never going to be able to grow as a country. And so we are extremely excited about our first guest joining us. She is Professor Melissa Harris Perry. She's the Maya Angelou Presidential Chair in the Department of Politics and International Affairs and the Department of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at Wake Forest University.
And she's also the founder and president of the Anna Julia Cooper Center and founding director of Wake the Vote. And if you don't know who Anna Julia Cooper is, there are two reasons. First, because we don't include remotely enough U.S. history on women and people of color, and because you haven't had the chance to study with Professor Harris Perry.
And not that those aren't enough accomplishments for one human, Professor Harris Perry is the first African-American woman to earn a PhD in political science from Duke University. She is a writer, TV, radio, and podcast host, and political commentator with a focus on African-American politics. And we are thrilled to welcome her to We're Speaking. Hello. Hi, Melissa, how are you?
Oh, I'm great. It's so nice to be with both of you.
Wonderful to have you here. So before we get into the really tough stuff, there are a lot of problems that we kind of do the chicken and egg debate with. So let's talk chickens, and specifically your chickens.
Actually talk chickens. Yes,
yes,
I love
actually
chickens.
talk chickens. Your chickens. And the first chicken I want to talk about is you've got an angry male living on your property.
I do.
Yeah.
His name is Rakim. He is a tiny rooster. So I've had a couple of roosters. Let me back up. In 2016, I got my first chickens. They were a gift from my husband. This was after the Melissa Harris Perry show had ended on MSNBC. I needed a creative outlet. My husband got me what we now call the magic chickens. And I basically turned into a farmer. There are now 24 chickens, including one rooster. We've had a couple of different roosters over the years, and one was incredibly sweet, just like the kindest, nicest rooster, big old guy. And then there's Rakim. And Rakim is tiny. He's like half the size of, if my girls are like 8 pounds, he's like a 4-pound rooster, but he is absolutely dramatically vicious and he runs at me every time, but he's tiny. So it's kind of like, whatever, dude. But yes, Rakim, he's very beautiful. So I put up with him, but he's a mean, mean guy.
I need to know, though, did your husband know that you wanted chickens? Was it just like, hey, chickens?
No, he did. He knew that I wanted chickens. And my husband, let's be clear, he is city mouse and I'm country mouse. We live very much in town, but we do have about 1.5 acres of land, which I'm sure my husband would like to do things like pave over and, I don't know, probably host parties. But for me, it's like, I'm going to farm every square inch of this 1.5 acres. So I don't think he quite meant to turn me into a farmer. So I call them magic chickens. It's possible my husband calls them evil chickens. It's hard to say, but they definitely awakened my inner farm girl.
Yeah, well, I completely believe that Rakim is evil because I grew up with my family having chickens and we had a bantam rooster, which is the breed that he is. And they're just mean little suckers. Like, mean. It's not good to just generalize across, a characteristic across an entire group. But it's true in this case. I have never heard anyone who has had an experience with a bantam rooster that they just have not been like pursued and attacked regularly by these things. They're terrified.
I think it's, short man syndrome, It's like the Napoleonic complex, but in a chicken. Exactly. So yeah, it's very intense, but he does make it exciting when I go out to the coop for eggs. That's for sure.
Right. And then you have some hens as well. And I saw you mentioned on Twitter that you have the Beckies with the good feathers.
Yes.
So I think we have a picture of Becky's. Yeah. So I was telling Maya earlier, Becky, your Becky chicken's hair or feathers is the same color as my hair. So I'm trying not to feel a little uncomfortable about this.
I was like, don't take offense. I was like,
No, right. All my Beckys are blonde and they're very sweet and they like, they're like come around you and stuff. But and they, they're very chatty, my little Beckys. But it's actually because I love my chickens. It's like a sign of affection that it helps me to. You were talking about stereotyping. It helps me to kind of get over stereotyping, so that if folks are and I will say I don't have any Karen chickens, but Beckys are a little less.
You eat the Karens.
I don't.
They're like calling the manager. They're like, we need to get more feed out here. We're hungry.
That's right. The Beckys are just like kind of cute and ditzy and blonde, but no, there are no Karen chickens, just the Beckys, and it helps me be a little kinder to the Beckys in my life. So
I love that.
It is nice. It's a nice microcosm, I'd have to say. Like it's you being able to reflect with animals. I do the same thing with my bunnies, so I get it. It's a calming sort of thing, So I'd love to find out more about the farm at some point, because I'm guessing there could be a very good docu-series about you living off the farm, like off the grid.
Yeah, well, we're definitely still on grid, but there. We had a bunch of ducks, wonderful ducks. We had a fox attack, but I will undoubtedly rebuild my duck flock. And there were 2 pigs, Rona and Lizzo. And Rona and Lizzo were just the joy of my life, but it turns out I'm not a very good pig mom, and I way overfed both of them for only having an acre and a half to walk around on. So they actually are now at a children's petting farm where they have like 40 acres to like run around on. But Lizzo was beautiful. She was a black pig with very long eyelashes, and she liked to walk around with like a child's piano in her mouth, which is how she became Lizzo. and Rona, because of course I got her during the quarantine for coronavirus. So Rona and Lizzo. There's lots of stories. You don't want to know about what happened with the bunnies. We won't.
Oh,
there's no more bunnies.
We won't. Okay, we won't go there then.
All right.
We won't go there.
All right.
That's a perfect time to pivot.
Yes. I definitely think we'll move on. Although I could talk pigs with you because I love pigs. They're wonderful, they're brilliant, and they're kind. So we'll set that aside. Bunnies are great too. Anyway, so moving on to why we actually had you here, although I would love to talk farms for the entire time, but really important stuff happening. So we want to make sure we leave time for that. We're talking a lot in this show about history and memory, and whether or not democracies can function and survive if we don't have agreed upon history and memory. So right now we don't have that. We don't have an agreement on what our American history is. How do we even begin to make progress? And don't we have to acknowledge at this point that really not everybody wants progress?
So I'd do a couple of things. So I'd split up history and memory. So if we think about what memory is, if we are using the verb to remember, right? So remember. So if membering is to put the pieces on, then remembrance is to put together our pieces. And we certainly know that memory is profoundly connected to situation, right? So even what we remember about our own personal lives and our own personal histories will depend a great deal on all kinds of things. So I'll give you a quick example. Where I teach now at Wake Forest University is also where I graduated as an undergraduate. So I left that campus, 20 years old. I came at 16, left at 20, and then I came back to teach, right? Literally 20 years after having graduated. And in the 20 years in between, I would have told you all kinds of things about what my experience at Wake Forest was, but it wasn't until I was back on campus. I had some former friends of mine who had also been my coworkers, at that time. And all of a sudden, the re-memories, right? The remembrances, my understanding of what happened there changed as I was connected again with the physical places and the people. So I will suggest that memory isn't perfect, and memory isn't meant to be perfect. Memory is actually serving purposes for us, for our communities, and for our nation. And so I am not completely against some false collective memories. And let me be clear about this. I actually think it's okay to teach kids kind of heroic stories about their nation, about their town. I have a 19-year-old who's just finished her first year of college, and I have a 7-year-old who just finished her first year of first grade. Now, my first grader, she's like, America is the best. Anytime she sees a red, white, and blue flag, she's like, that is America. My husband, who's from New Orleans, was talking about something, and she was like, but I don't care if they do that in New Orleans, Daddy. We're in America. Like, she is like a tiny black patriot.
Like,
she's like, yeah,
it's like a little cheerleader for America.
That's
Bring the
right.
pom-poms
4th of
out.
July. Look, now, it's also true that she will tell you the best place in the whole world is the Piedmont region of North Carolina. It is not the best place in the whole world. But I think you should build up in kids all the things that they are, their national identity, their racial identity, their familial identity, that it's okay to have some false stories about that, especially early on. Now, my 19-year-old, she's got a different perspective on America. She has a much more complicated perspective because as we get older, not only memory, right, our kind of collective meaning making, but history, right? So by the time you're a college student, you should really be able to say, yeah, I'm down for America. It's mine. And can I run you through, right, enslavement? And let me run you through mass incarceration. And let's talk about what happened during World War II. But sometimes that ability to criticize comes from first a basis of love, of shared identity. And it is from that basis that we can then create the critical history around it.
I absolutely love that perspective. In a way, it's almost like how we let kids believe in Santa and the Tooth Fairy, and then we take them aside one day and we're like, hey, by the way, there's systemic racism. You know,
exactly. By the way, your mom worked really hard for those damn presents. So stop, being real excited about the white guy with the beard. That was me, black lady. I did that.
Exactly. That being said, watching a lot of what's happening in the media, I do feel like the GOP is trying to rewrite history in real time, like with what's going on with January 6th and trying to shape those perspectives. And it feels disorienting. Do you feel that that's what's happening right now?
So whenever I see a bunch of state legislative bodies all taking up similar actions, I figure that's actually not really the legislators. So again, I think we're impacted by our understanding of Congress. These are full-time jobs, fairly well paid. People go live in DC. That's not what your state lawmaker is doing, right? Your state lawmaker has at least one other job, maybe two. Many state lawmakers don't earn any income, right, for the job, and they don't have big state legislative staffs, right? So what happens? Where does this legislation come from? Well, particularly on the conservative and Republican side, state lawmakers are getting it from big interest groups that are actually preparing this legislation and handing it to them, right? So ALEC is one that we've talked about. It's certainly not the only one. And actually on the right, they're a bit more organized on this than the left. And so you'll often see all of the anti-trans kids laws, right, that are coming through right now. Mm-hmm. You'll see big slates around voting rights repression, abortion restrictions, for example, and the critical race theory one that is making its way through state legislatures right now. So the first thing I say is I'm not absolutely sure it's Republicans per se, but it certainly is Republicans carrying the water of these big interest groups. So why are these interest groups interested in curriculum? I take it real personally as a teacher, as a parent, as a professor, because from my perspective, there's nothing we shouldn't ban books, we shouldn't burn books, and we certainly shouldn't ban ideas. So I do think some of it is about rewriting history, but I think even maybe more nefarious than that is simply the idea that there are some ideas we shouldn't consider, that there's some perspectives that are just off the table. And that, almost more than the content of it, that notion that there's some set of ideas in the world so horrifying that we shouldn't even consider them in an intellectual and academic schooling context, that really, really worries me.
Yeah, when we don't consider those things, when we don't have that full history, and we're seeing less and less civics education that kids now have in school, just kind of the nuts and bolts of exactly what you were talking about, like what happens on the state level, how does a bill become a law, and who's
Yes.
involved in that process, that we're really, kids are getting more and more removed from that already. And then to have them removed from large portions of American history, I really worry how much that can potentially move the needle with initiatives like voter suppression laws. I mean, are they not connected, these efforts?
Yeah, I think they are in really critically important ways. So I think, we talk, for example, about partisanship or voter choice, where, we often look at the big demographics. So we ask, how did women vote? Or how did Black folks vote? Or whatever. But it's also true that, for example, college education has been a critical determining factor of voting decisions. So as I like to sometimes, when we're playing with like kind of different variables in class, I'll just point out that basically white folks with college education vote about like Black people. So like basically white folks have to go to college in order to learn to see the world politically the way that Black people
Yes.
do without so much as a high school diploma.
It's
So
true.
I've always kind of said that as a joke. But listen to what I just said, right? If going to college turns white voters into Black voters, whoo, if 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 what I want are voters who don't vote the way that Black voters vote, then that is an existential threat. College becomes an existential threat.
Mhm.
So I think part of what I point out is that, that had always been just kind of a joke based on the empirical data. But one could also read that as ideological, as saying that there's something going on in college that is like putting ideas in the minds of young people. And that's actually not what I think is going on in college. Mostly what we think is going on with college is this set of socialization processes. And it actually sort of evens out. They're actually not the most left or the most right winged folks, because they are meant to learn some critical thinking skills. But you don't have to wait for college for that, right? What we want ideally in some aspirational Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, vision mountain of, Monticello notion of America, is we would want an educated electorate who understood that being part of the country, part of America, part of our civic life required certain collective responsibilities and collective rights. That we have responsibilities not only to ourselves, but to our communities. Part of that responsibility is voting, it's learning, it's thinking, it's speaking, it's wearing a mask in a pandemic. Part of what education, in fact, initially was almost to the point that it was distressing for some folks. It was about forming that set of social ties, that belief that we're part of something larger. If you take education and turn it just into like, can you read this piece of paper? Can you write these letters? And you take it away from like, do you care about each other? Do you know each other's history? And most importantly, are you curious? Do you have any questions about how the world works? Are you at all interested in anyone's life experience but your own? Are you even interested in understanding your own life experience in context? Woo, that's when the good stuff happens. And if we take that out, yeah, then we have drones, and drones that can be easily manipulated for a partisan advantage.
We spoke at length with Professor Melissa Harris Perry earlier, and we didn't want you to miss any part of the conversation, so we decided to air it in its entirety.
Yes, one benefit to having a streaming show is that flexibility to run longer interviews. So coming up, part 2 of our interview with Melissa Harris Perry.
I never thought the Republican Party had any credibility to begin with once Trump got in office, but I do think that we Democrats need to be a little more proactive, or somehow he will get back in some sort of office or something. He just scares me. And I think that we need to be a little more assertive, just like he's doing.
I want to know why what happened in Myanmar can't happen here.
No reason. I mean, it should happen here. No reason. Right? That's right.
America has crossed a line. The Republican Party believes in ending the American experiment, led by a man obsessed with power and money, who will say and do anything to seize control again.
This election was rigged.
To punish those who oppose him. His followers don't just disagree with us. They've got something worse in mind. We know what national populism and authoritarianism lead to. Every time.
That's what this is all about.
That's why we will never compromise with this evil. We will never step back from the line because we believe in America. Are you in this fight, or have they already won?
What really needs to happen is the Democrats need to grow a spine. They're too worried about what the media has to say, and they have to start getting down and gritty, just like the GOP does. They need to call out Manchin and Sinema every day. Start campaigning in their districts, in their states, to get them ousted. Put up a primary challenge. We need to pass this John Lewis and H.R. 1. That has to get passed immediately. Democracy is it's on the cliff. It's hanging off.
Welcome back to We're Speaking. This is part 2 of our interview with Melissa Harris Perry.
She is insightful, brilliant, and so engaging that we didn't want you to miss a minute of the conversation.
What you bring up about this idea of the college elites, I hear a lot about this, where it's like, oh, you know, you go to college, you adopt this level of thinking, and there's this notion that colleges are extremely liberal. But when I'm thinking about Nikole Hannah-Jones and the percentage of Black women professors, tenured professors, what's the reality?
Yeah, so there are some very progressive liberal campuses, for sure. I also teach in North Carolina at a small private, formerly Baptist university. So I would say ours is maybe not the most progressive in certain ways. But I'll also say this. I taught a course this semester titled Black Lives Matter. It was all online because we were, some students had classes in person, but we teaching most political science classes online. 52 students in the class. Anybody want to make a guess about how many of my 52 students were white students?
Ooh, I actually do want to take a guess.
Small number.
I want to say all of them. I want to say like most.
47.
Wow.
47 of the 52 students at a small private liberal arts school in a class that wasn't required in any way. I taught it because I felt like coming out of the summer and out of this, everything that we were experiencing, I wanted students to have context. So I guess, again, what I'd say is for me, that was a class that I would have taught very differently, I think, with a classroom of 50 Black students. And when I'm teaching to 47 white students, Black Lives Matter, I am presuming that many of them are coming with this initial curiosity, that they actually don't feel like they know all the answers, that they may have some social commitments, but they don't know it all. And so we're walking through it. But I can tell you for the Black students that sometimes felt like, oh my God, are you asking to touch my hair? Like, are we like going all the way back to like your curiosity moment? So I don't want to say it's easy. I just want to say like, but democracy isn't supposed to be easy. College isn't supposed to be easy. Not even K through 12 is supposed to be easy. We're supposed to be a little uncomfortable. We're supposed to be stretching, right? Getting the new skills. So no, in my experience, colleges and universities, like every other institution, including American broadcast media, are primarily responding to incentives. And I will say that I think more than anything else, that's what this big stink about critical race theory is right now. It is simply to create a new set of incentives. So when the UNC Board of Trustees turns down Nikole Hannah-Jones's tenure, right, the public rises up in anger, right? And the incentive structure becomes, oh my goodness, let's make sure that she has a position, if not at UNC, then somewhere, right? Higher ed feels that. So what I would say is higher ed also feels the pressure of donors. It feels the pressure of enrollment. It feels the pressure of reduced dollars from state legislatures. It feels the pressure from parents who are like, can my kids get a job? Especially if they have all these student loans. So I don't think they're really governing ideologically. I think they're governing based on these structures and these incentives. And there aren't very many, there are very, very few, vanishingly few African-American women, full professors like myself who came through the tenure process, who are academics. We constitute less than 1% of all faculty. So don't worry. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't indoctrinate your kids. Secondly, we don't want to indoctrinate your kids. And the last thing I'll say on this is, remember, ideas are for studying. If you go to seminary and you read the Bible, it's because they're trying to, and you have agreed to, and you want to learn the Bible as a believer. But if you go to a religion class on an undergraduate campus and you read the Bible, it might be that nobody in there believes any of it as a faith claim. You're reading the Bible because, well, to be an educated person in the world, you ought to know what the Bible says. And by the way, you also ought to know what the Quran says. And when I took religion class and read the Quran, it was taught to me by an actual Baptist minister who definitely wasn't trying to make me Muslim. But, right, we read the Quran because we live in the world. So you read Hannah Arendt and you read The Road to Serfdom and you read the conservatives and you read the liberals, and you're not afraid of ideas. In fact, you're excited by them, especially the ones that you disagree with.
Yeah, as a mom who just had a son who graduated and has another son who is a sophomore in college now, my experience with my sons has been that they have come home and challenged me and my ideas, far from being indoctrinated in a more socially liberal viewpoint. They've actually come home because, in part because of what they're hearing from in classes from professors, but it's also that exposure to so many other people who have had different life experiences than you have and lived in different parts of the country. And our country is so different now, regionally. So when we're trying to make national decisions together and we have those huge regional differences, is history a place that we can kind of lean back on as a point to start from? Or where do we even begin to come together when we all do things so differently?
So I think the first thing I'd say is I don't worry too much about unity. So I know this is like why I don't celebrate Kwanzaa, because I just can't bring myself to light the black candle in the middle for Umoja unity. I'm like, what? Why? Like, I don't even like those dudes. Why do I have to be unified with them? And you know, it's kind of one of the, if I just had a spare $1 billion, I would totally run for president, not because I want to be president, to be clear, but because I think it would be, I think presidents must have that extraordinary opportunity that so few of us have to see, everything from the Great Lakes to the, Western Plains to the, South Sea Islands in South Carolina. Like, we really are a big country, like big, like geographically huge.
Huge, yeah.
Huge. Not as big as we think we are because the maps are a little distorted, again, critical race theory on this, but we really are a huge place. Now, that said, you can also go to the Gap anywhere, like really anywhere. So, you can't get good red beans, just anywhere. That's New Orleans, but you can go to like the Gap anywhere. You can catch a little HGTV on any cable network, like Montana to Mississippi. So there are things that are very different. There's also a way that capitalism helps to bring us together. So I'm less worried about us being brought together on substance. What I want us to be brought together on is how we make decisions. So I don't mind losing elections, but I want us to be deeply committed to fair election processes. In fact, I'm down for losing. Let's lose a good, strong, hard-fought, fair election. Let's go. My worry is if we don't agree that that's how we make decisions, right? So part of what I would say is, yes, I think history is critical, because not because we need to agree on what happened, or at least not on all of what happened, and even if we can agree on what happened, we don't have to agree on the meaning of all of it, right? So I can look at the perspective of intergenerational chattel bondage and being descended from people who were sold as enslaved people who never knew freedom for themselves or their parents or their children. I have an emotive, affective, visceral reaction, even to the study of enslavement, that I don't necessarily expect everyone in a classroom to have. And I will say, for example, that when we study the incarceration of the Japanese people by a democratic president in these United States, as horrified as I am by it, my stomach doesn't turn in that same, like, oh my God, that was my grandmother way. But I do recognize that for my Japanese American friends, it turns literally in that, like, that was my uncle, that was my brother. So I think it's okay for us to see history and feel it differently. But what history can do for us is to remind us that these set of processes about how we adjudicate our disagreements through the blood of the slaughtered, in order to paraphrase James Weldon Johnson, that this is not some ivory path that we come to. We are here from the sweat and the pain and the sacrifice of so many. It matters to have decided to have been a representative democracy, even if we are still constantly in the process of trying to actually achieve it. It matters that that is our goal, not that, like, bureaucratic competence is our goal, not that the biggest fanciest building on the block is. No, our goal is supposed to be all persons are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that this is the only reason for which governments were instituted among persons, and governments get their capacity to govern us from one thing: consent of the governed. All right, here we go. That's the blueprint. Let's do it. As long as we're all committed to that, I don't mind. We can fight about all the rest. And I do think history helps us, hopefully, if well taught, to remember that.
I feel so energized by your commitment to participation in our democracy. And when you talk about incentives earlier, I'm thinking, how do we incentivize people to participate? Because not everybody maybe has the same curiosity and interest and energy around it that we do. But what could this incentives be?
Yeah, I mean, but actually, yes, right now you can call him a college professor, because, like, pizza, you give them pizza and t-shirts and, like, you'll get great engagement. But this is really what great organizers do, right? So, like, I don't know, how did Stacey Abrams get all the people to vote in Georgia? I don't know. Look, I guess I'd say a couple of things. We know that people are more likely, if we take just voting, people are more likely to vote when an election is close. So I think what baffles me most, for example, about the restrictions on voting rights right now is that, I don't know if folks noticed, but it wasn't just a lot of Democrats that turned out in 2020. It was record turnout for everybody, right? It was a huge turnout for Republicans as well as for Democrats. Let's harness that energy instead of trying to send people home. So what energizes people? What I'll say is, I'll just tell one quick example. You talked earlier about Wake the Vote. It's the class I taught in my life that I still think of as probably the most important teacher work I've ever done. It was a year-long program. It included 40 students. About half were Republicans and about half were Democrats. And we started in the beginning of 2016, in January, not knowing what that election year was going to be. We went to Iowa, New Hampshire, to both South Carolina primaries. The students worked here in North Carolina. We went to both the Democratic and the Republican convention. We went to the White House. We went to the Congress. And then the students also planned 35 days prior to the election of events around 4 issue areas that they had chosen. in 2016 with Democrats and Republicans. Like I spent 2016 on a bus with kids who disagreed with each other. We were on a bus. Some of our students were undocumented. Some of our students, we had one staff member who is himself queer, Muslim, and from Florida. And if you will remember, the Pulse nightclub shooting happened like just before we went to the conventions. This was not just brain work. This was brain work and soul work and all of that. And those students, like I'm still very much in touch with them. And I don't want to pretend that in any way, like they got along. Cause I mean, the battles, I mean, we really should have been a reality show. Like there were some fights. But I think they're the reason that when a lot of other people felt so depressed on election night 2016, I just couldn't, because I had seen students be willing to do really hard work. And then we all went to the inauguration and we all went to the Women's March. What incentivized them? Literally, to come back to your point, ice cream. I mean, I know this sounds crazy, but because it was so freaking cool. Like we had Ben & Jerry's was helping to sponsor us. So there was a lot of free ice cream. We had Rock the Vote. So we had music and events. We had free t-shirts for every single place that we went. We got to travel. At one point we did in fact go to a Beyonce concert who was doing a, GOTV event, like, because it was fun. Because why shouldn't democracy be something like, you should get like, look, how are we getting people to get vaccinated for COVID? NASCAR tickets and lotteries.
Yep.
Lotteries. I'm so mad I was already vaccinated. I was like, I'm about to go get it again. I want some good, I just did that stuff for free. Why should like?
Didn't know there was swag. There's swag.
Yeah, I was just like trying to save my life. Who knew? So I know it's silly, but I actually think we should make participation less grueling and more fun, more connecting, more valuable to whatever things it is that gives us that sense that, again, like my 7-year-old, like America's great, at least in the sense of even if I'm losing, man, being part of this is something that is worth my time and energy. Which, by the way, is what happens if you really do civic education K through 12, because you got to kind of bake some of that enthusiasm in when young people are, in fact, very young.
Yeah, because we get to do this. Like, not everybody around I'm not going to go into my speech that I used to give my kids when I drag them voting with me, because I will still cry and they will still laugh at me for crying, talking about democracy. But it's true. I mean, it's got to be instilled, and they need to understand, kids need to understand not everybody gets to do this. And so that we get this
There
chance.
are disenfranchised people starving for the vote.
That's right. And we can't pack up our vote and ship them to the starving non-voters around the world.
I'm just picturing your kids as you were doing
the same all the time.
Very much so. Yep. But to your point, like making it fun, like I'm all for making it fun. And, we have the Franklin Project, which we coordinate with, which is all about civic engagement as well. It's nonpartisan, nonprofit, and it's about trying to get people excited again about participating in our democracy. I love your enthusiasm. I have to say, like it's beyond infectious. It truly is. And we talk about this a lot, Lisa and I, and quite frankly, if anybody I talk to, is that, as marginalized people, as people of color, we're still committed to the U.S. being a great country, to working to improve it. And so sometimes I ask myself, I'm like, do Black women have to fix everything? Like, do we have to be the cheerleaders?
Well, so my grandmother, my father's mother, was a domestic worker who, I can't remember if she finished high school. I don't think so, but certainly did not go to college. And she was a genius. So I just want to be really, I don't use that lightly. Like my grandmother could make a wedding dress without a pattern. And in fact, regularly did. And people came to her to have their wedding dresses made. So she was a genius, but she was also kind of a, round Southern Black woman. And so was easily ignored or forgotten in public spaces. And that was actually part of her genius. She knew how to be in those spaces. So when you ask, do Black women have to fix it all? I mean, I don't know, but I will say I'm the granddaughter of a laundress and of a seamstress and of a domestic worker, which means if you give me your filth, I probably will clean it up, right? If you give me your dirty money, I'll probably launder it for you and make it, do some good on the other side. But I'll also say that I think for me, it is that commitment, that enthusiasm is not, it is for America, but it is not on behalf of someone other than my ancestors. So again, when I think about what my people were made of, so I think about folks now who go to church and their feeling is, I know that God loves me because this job search worked out, or I know that God loved me because, I got this, fine husband over here. I know God loves me because I prayed on this, Nissan Sentra and I got it. I mean, okay, who am I to say what blessings you have coming? But I will say that for me, what is extraordinary is that my great-great-great-grandmother was sold on a street corner in Richmond, did not ever know freedom for herself. She did not ever expect freedom for her children. There was no living evidence that God even existed, much less that he liked her. And yet she somehow believed that God loved her. And I don't say this to be a Christian evangelist at all. I say this to be an evangelist really for my ancestors who somehow knew the core of themselves, that they were lovable, that they mattered in the universe, that there might even be a universal being that loved and thought about them, despite the fact that there was no evidence. So it wouldn't matter how many tweets you could have shown her of all the terrible things. She still would have been yep, but God is down with me and I'm down with God. And here we go. And then my people, again, when I think about what we're made of, here we are in bondage, in enslavement. What do? We get creative. We're oh, okay, so if we have to plant and hoe and bring in, we're actually going to create modern agriculture. Me, if I'm not getting paid by actual full honorarium, I can sometimes be a little cranky. Am I going to really do all the things for this lecture? These people never earned wages for their work. And they literally made, they made the right, and that wasn't, I just want to be clear, we tell it in this roots way, it was all under the whip. No, these were people who had intellect and brilliance, and they bothered to use it, to cultivate it, even in these circumstances. And then again, what are my people made of? At the end of enslavement, the first things that we do, and history just shows us this, we go and find our families who have been sold away from us. Marriage rates skyrocket, reconnection with our families, and then we run for office. We are not 5 years out of intergenerational chattel bondage, and we're registering to vote. We're voting in record numbers, and we're running for office. So I don't get to feel oh my God, I had to live through the Trump years. Yep. I had to live through the Trump years. Now I've had to live through a whole ass pandemic. That was a lot. But my people read books, they got their families together, they believed they were worthy in the world, and they actually decided to run for office and to vote. And even after 100 years of Jim Crow, as soon as they could, they did it again. So I don't know if I'm fixing America, but I do have a responsibility to my people for what we did to continue that legacy, because my life just is not as hard as theirs was.
I love ending on such a call to action and hope and resilience. We talk about that a lot on this show. It's a really beautiful place for us to stop because we do have work to do. We don't get to sit down, feel sorry for ourselves. We certainly don't have it as bad as as a lot of other generations. So that
And
perspective,
see how
thank you so much.
And see how knowing the history of
Yeah,
racism
that's
in
wonderful
America
perspective.
doesn't
Thank you so
make
much
you
for
angry
being
and
with
small.
us today.
Yes, thank you. Throughout the month of June, you can catch Melissa Harris Perry as the guest host of Public Radio's The Takeaway and as the host of the web series What Makes Pride at pflag.org.
Another thing you don't want to miss is the latest episode of the Lincoln Project podcast with Reed Galen.
Trump intuits his base very well. He's very instinctive about what he knows will drive attention toward himself. But what's also very interesting is how little actual work he has to do to make the party sort of stay in line. I mean, just look at the example of Liz Cheney, right? She came out against him. She said he should never be president again. He sends out a statement. And that's really all he had to do. Sometimes you don't have to be a tactician of a Vladimir Lenin. He's just able to say, go after that person, and his people take care of it.
Just noting, this podcast also includes a critical discussion on not wearing your pants backwards and the relative merits of jorts versus parachute pants, and whether or not any of the four guys on the podcast wore either of those. They also have a really important conversation about the Authoritarians playbook. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It's really a great listen. Coming up on this week's Offs, we're going to give you the winner and, of course, your responses to GOP credibility.
The GOP has little to no credibility left. There are a few upstanding folks in Congress that are trying to do the right thing, but I think it's just too far gone past the point of return now. It's sickening, it's sad, and quite frankly, it's scary. I never thought I would be living to see Republicans acting in this way. My grandfather, grandmother, they're rolling in their graves, I'm sure, in horror. Hang in there, keep doing the good work, and keep it up. Bye.
Well, they're burning the house down.
Please protect yourself.
Vice President, I'm speaking.
This is an embarrassment. If you count the legal votes, I easily win.
What the fuck?
Have some faith, I'll make you a believer.
Hi, Catherine Simmons here, Houston, Texas. Big fan of the Lincoln Project and all those affiliated with it. Is there any good GOP left? Any credible GOP left? I think there is some, but they are lacking morals. They are lacking character. This has to stop. I'll do anything that I can do, including supporting the Lincoln Project. I will type. I will send emails. I will do whatever I have to do. My next goal is to try to get Beto elected governor of the state of Texas.
Welcome back to We're Speaking. One of many things we know about you, our Lincoln Project audience, is that you're passionate.
Yeah, whether you're leaving us voicemails like you've heard throughout the show, tweeting us, or leaving us messages on Facebook, just know we see you. We love getting all of these.
Yes. So John Yonker dropped us a note on Facebook, and he said, to restore credibility, Republican legislators at all levels need to denounce the false narratives about election integrity on forums listened to by their voters. That's fair.
Yep, that's
I'll
fair.
agree. Yeah.
All right, the next one we have is Daryl Lee, who wrote, do you think the GOP has any credibility left? None, nada, zero, zilch. What could they do to restore it? Dissolve the party and start over. Totally agree. Burn it to the ground. Nothing worth saving. Just start all over.
Not
again.
literally. Don't clip
Not
that.
literally.
Don't burn anything. No burning.
No. Figuratively, burn it to the ground.
Yes.
All right, Reva Grace Leonard. What Republican Party? The party I've always identified as Republican has been shredded. See, not burned to the ground, shredded. It is now the party of fascism, lawlessness, cruelty, greed, disregard for life, racism, misogyny, and evil. I am stunned at the shift.
I wasn't. I saw it coming, but that's just me.
I know you did. You saw it before I did. Yeah. All right.
Let's see. We got coming up Debbie Hughes Winall. I have totally lost respect for them. There are only one or two in Congress that sound legitimate and principled.
Yeah.
One or two? Which one?
I'm trying to think of the second. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Two? That's a very generous view. The next is from Deborah Bott. All of us who follow Lincoln Project are disgusted by today's so-called GOP, which have all boarded the crazy train, feel like I need to sing, to authoritarianism and fascism. They make me ashamed. I once supported that traitorous anti-American party. Danger lies ahead for all until somebody figures out a way to bust up this deluded cult. Yes. Yeah, it really is. It really is a cult. And there is a recent Lincoln Project podcast about that too, that people should go back and listen to, because it really matters.
Yeah. And we have to figure out how to bust people out of the cult, because they are our fellow Americans and friends and family members. So yeah, give the podcast a listen, where it's all hands on deck kind of situation.
Yeah. We would appreciate if our friends and family did not destroy our democracy. Speaking of destroying the democracy, it's time to announce our Oh for Fuck's Sake winner. And it is Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida. Now, it's difficult to keep up with all the loathsome shit that says, wow, DeSantis does.
It is difficult.
I don't even want to have to say his name at this point. Here are a few things that helped make him this week's award winner. Celebrating Take Your Daughter to Discriminate Day, where he had his young daughter hand him pens so he could sign a cruel anti-trans youth bill. Yeah. Celebrating Florida's lousy 40% COVID vaccination rate with a Freedom Over Fauci concert, where people packed in shoulder to unvaccinated shoulder. And if you weren't able to contract COVID there, you might get lucky on a cruise, because Ron has prohibited Florida cruise lines to inquire about the vaccination status of those booking trips. And there's no history of there being problems with communicable diseases on cruises. So
no, not at all. Those are the safest places to be, actually.
Absolutely. And then add to that Florida's new voter suppression law, DeSantis denying promised mental health funds to survivors of the Pulse nightclub shooting, and his unwavering support of propping up the big lie. Ron, you can keep your effed up definition of freedom along with this week's Oh for Fuck's Sake award.
Yeah, congrats. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you missed the breakdown last night, you missed Rick giving this behind-the-scenes peek at how the Lincoln Project goes after the Republican anti-democracy machine. Have a look.
We're playing the psychological warfare angle against their leadership and their donors. We're setting the narrative in the public space. We're being competitive in races where we can make a difference. And we're doing it all in a way that is teaching people how to get in this fight, and how to effectively advocate, and how to effectively speak to voters they need to get to, and how to effectively stand up and be bold in a time when withdrawal, silence, and cowardice are rewarded very frequently.
You can catch the episodes of The Breakdown Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. And don't miss next Tuesday, June 15th, with a very special guest, Michael Cohen.
I'm really excited about that interview. That's going to be fire. The three of them together.
Yes. And I heard him on the podcast, and he's actually working on prison reform right now because he was a prisoner. So that's one of
funny what little experience, what kind of insight that will give you into
all of a sudden
been happening all along. Yeah.
Empathy. Wow. It's like you just have to go to prison to get it.
There you go. Yep. All right. That does it for this week, everybody. Make sure you join us again next Wednesday, June 16th, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Maya and I will be back with a whole new slate of Oh for Fuck's Sake nominees and all the other good stuff that we want to bring you. So have a wonderful week.
Yep. Have a good one.
My name's Alan Chucky. I live in Florida. I'm 70 years old. Retired firefighter and a Vietnam era veteran. I've been watching all this stuff for the last 4 years with Mr. Trump, and this is a dangerous man. We got to make sure he never gets back up there. As far as the Republican Party, they've, in my opinion, have sold their souls to this guy. Most of them have no credibility or honor or integrity. In my opinion, he is nothing more than a fascist. He has Nazi tendencies, and he wants to be a dictator.
Hey, this is Brenda calling from Georgia. While I am still some 28 years along a registered Republican, my heart simply is not with the current regime for the foreseeable future. I will only be able to vote blue. I'm not a Democrat, but I don't have anything in common with the people who are currently Republicans. I mean, it's disgraceful. It's embarrassing.
America is the only country founded on an idea, the radical idea that citizens could govern themselves. It was called the American experiment because there was no reason to believe it would work. A republic, if you can keep it. Every generation has been called to defend and renew the promise of America. For some, it was on the battlefield. For others, it was on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now, the battle has come to the steps of the Capitol itself. Democracy is under assault like no time since 1860. We have a choice. Look away or stand up and fight. It's not about conservative or liberal. It's about freedom versus autocracy. We didn't choose this moment, but history has chosen us. Which side are you on?
The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.